intersection of both IT and marketing, and Susan, it'd be great for you to sort of share a little bit of your background.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. So, been with Men's Wearhouse for about 3.5 years. When I joined Men's Wearhouse, it was more on the digital/marketing side. And interestingly enough, because all of IT was run out of Houston and I was here in the Bay Area, I found my job a little bit challenging. And needless to say, because probably I complained too much, I ended up owning all of IT. So I learned my lesson. And maybe what we can talk about later is just so while it wasn't necessarily a big strategic plan that I would have this position in the company, we came to realize pretty quickly the benefits of having both areas under, that being marketing and IT, under a single individual. And so I've done some pretty exciting things, and so I think later on we can talk a little more about some of that.
Thank you, Suzanne. You're pretty much at the bleeding edge of that intersection, so I'm sure we'll see more of you in the future. And John, you're a data guy. You've sort of been a data guy all your life, so tell us a little bit about what you've done.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me here today. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm responsible at Schwab for the data analytics, market research, database marketing, client loyalty, a number of functions that really kind of thrive on data. I joined the company about 2 years ago, really got very excited about the opportunity to leverage data and analytics to really drive value for the firm. I've been in the information services business for many, many years, as you can probably tell from my gray hair. But I really have a passion about how you take data, analytics, and leverage it for business value. That's kind of who I am in a nutshell.
That's great. And for those of you who are nerds in the audience, John actually has a PhD in statistics. Something that's pretty rare in the CMO suite right now, but I think we'll see a lot more of that as well.
Well, I have to say, don't give me a test. It was many, many years ago when I really got hands down into the analytics, but since that time I've kind of been more focused on how do you leverage it for value. But yeah, thanks for that reminder.
Well, thank you for joining us. Susan, why don't we start with you? You talked about how you have both marketing and IT. Tell us a little bit about how that came to pass and what that's allowed you to do that would have been harder otherwise.
Okay, so as I mentioned, when I got to Men's Wearhouse, one of the reasons why I was hired was particularly to focus on the digital side and opportunities for the company. And I have to say, 3.5 years ago, we were definitely behind. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, Men's Wearhouse, we're primarily men's tailored apparel. And the CEO at the time hadn't really put a lot of focus on the digital world, whether e-commerce or online marketing, none of that. And so when I was hired, it was really with this idea, how do we introduce digital to make the company successful in the online world? And being here in the Bay Area, I started to build the team from a business standpoint, but I had learned from my past experience how crucial it is to have a strong technology IT team as well, and to be able to work closely with those folks. And so, as I mentioned, when I got here, all of IT was run out of Houston. A lot of the digital work was being done by consultants. And for me, it just wasn't working. And so, through numerous conversations with the CEO, we ended up changing a lot of the management within the IT group. I hired a new CIO that reported into me in Houston, and then split the IT group in two, which was a little scary at the time. Hired a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, to report directly to me here in the Bay Area. And, the idea being any of the technology that touched the customer would be managed here, close to the business. And my CIO in Houston runs all the back office enterprise systems. And so it has worked. I mean, not that, it's still a bit of a challenge being, in different locations, but it's been great having that IT group close to the business. And what it has allowed us to do is to just move fast. And that's what we needed to do. Having it all under one person, so I was able to come up with a strategic plan. I presented it back to the board, got their approval to move forward and get the right people on board and in the room and I have to say, in fact, when we were just talking about this presentation, we feel like, and this is conversations I've had now with board members and our CEO, we feel like in the period of 2.5 years, we have caught up, if not surpassed, some of our competitors or just other retailers in terms of what we're doing digital.
That's great, Susan. Thanks for sharing that. John, Schwab has a great reputation for making hay out of data, to really sort of leveraging data in the business. Can you talk about one or two projects that are particularly challenging and that you think are making a big difference at Schwab?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd love to. And you're right. Schwab is a very data-driven company and culture. We make a lot of our decisions based upon data. Segmentation, targeting, measurement, all very data-focused and all the way up to the executives of the company. So you might say, well, why am I excited about being at Schwab? Because I believe it's just a huge untapped opportunity to kind of take it to the next level, which really gets down to me is really deeper understanding about our customers and prospects. And the way we're doing that is really the need for data and the need to capture data about all the touch points of our customers and prospects, website visits, branch visits, calls, telephone calls, social, being able to take the information about your customers and prospects and really understand where they are in the shopping journey, what are their wants and needs, and be able to kind of use data and analytics to deliver the right message to the right customer at the right time. So just to give you a little bit of color on this thing, when we were there, we had a lot of behavioral transaction data, in terms of people who are making transactions and buying and selling stocks and ETFs and things of that nature, but we didn't have the touch points associated with interactions. So we basically have been building what we call an Interaction Depot, which is a database of touch points, website visits, call center visits, branch visits, bringing that information together, the person, the what, the when, and the why, the reason behind that touch point, bring it into a database so that we can then kind of create value out of that. A couple of things we're looking at is kind of the shopping journey, looking at all these different touch points to understand customers, where they are in a touch point, so you can really optimize your marketing messages. And in addition, not only to understand the dynamics of the shopping journey, but also to kind of personalize and target at that point in time. Are we there today? No, we're absolutely not. We're on a journey. We're making a lot of progress. We've shown a lot of value, but there's definitely a lot of room for growth in this area for our company, and as well as a lot of other companies pursuing kind of a similar dream.
That's great. And Susan, I know you've been spearheading a lot of data initiatives at Men's Wearhouse as well. Is there a story that you'd like to share in that space?
Yes, and so one of our big initiatives when I first got to the company was how do we pull together all of our customer information. And it was great. We had, again, everyone in the room talking about what information we wanted to have readily available to us as we create and improve upon that customer experience. And so as a result, we've been working on amassing, all of our customer demographics, their transaction history, their browsing behavior. We are pretty close at this point having all of that in one location and real time. And we're pretty fortunate because Men's Wearhouse has a loyalty program. It's called our Perfect Fit program. And close to 90% of our revenue is associated with a Perfect Fit member. And so we have amazing amounts of data on our customers. And when I got there, we realized, well, this data was being, pulled together and kept clean. We weren't doing a whole lot with it. And so now we're at that point where we're working with a few pretty innovative companies on now how do we improve that customer experience. And for example, working with a company that's allowing us, first of all, through our emails to deliver real-time personalized product recommendations. And it takes into account all of that information I mentioned, browsing, clicking behavior, transaction behavior, demographics. And because it's real time, if you don't open that email for 2 weeks and you shop with us, during that time period, you can open a very different email potentially. In 2 weeks' time, because it's pulling those recommendations as that email renders on your phone or on your computer. And so we're starting with email. We're now implementing some of that capability within our website so that you'll see real-time recommendations. We're looking at how to apply it within our stores in terms of clienteling, and as well for our direct initiatives. Is that correct, Neal?
That's great, Susan. Thank you for sharing that. And so the common theme I seem to be hearing for us both, these very different experiences, is this notion of real time, this notion of sort of unifying both sort of transaction experiences and sort of touch points that are more browsing behavior or sort of interactions in both cases, both online and offline. And then also the notion of leveraging these to personalize the experience. What are some of the technology challenges you faced as you sort of develop these? And what does that mean for some of the startups out here today?
For me?
For both of you, sir. And John, you're welcome to go first.
Okay. Well, yeah, hey, that's a great question. I mean, I think, a lot of people talk about big data and how all the different opportunities you have. And there's many challenges of data, but one of the biggest ones that I find is in the integration of data. So we have all this data that come from different systems. How do you put all this data together? How do you make sure that you integrate the data for that individual consumer or for that prospect or customer, given all the data? The data is, for those who I'm sure there's a data audience, no, this data is not clean. I mean, the data comes off of these web log data or different systems. There's lots of inherent issues with the data, and how do you basically collect it, analyze it, and bring it all together? So I think the integration of the data is kind of probably one of our biggest challenges. We continue to get better on it, but it is really a lot of heavy lifting, and we definitely could use some help there. The other area I think is kind of in the deployment. Okay, so we basically, I always say when we're talking about data, we don't want to build a field of dreams, build this big, huge, massive data warehouse of information, and then all of a sudden we're going to have this great value that just kind of comes out of it. You have to kind of think about the applications and how do you actually deliver the value from the data. So I think that's the other area is deployment, in terms of having the data, being able to integrate it. You mentioned real time or even in batch, but being able to integrate it quickly and fastly and being able to deploy it in applications to customers. So integration of data and deployment, I think, are two of the biggest challenges that we face.
That's great. So integration and the deployment of the data itself. And Susan, what about sort of, what are some of the challenges you've faced, and what are the opportunities for startups as a result of that?
Yeah, and I, agree with all that's been said in terms of the challenges. What we found is really starting, almost at the end in terms of how are you going to use the data? How is it going to make you smarter, make better decisions, provide a better customer experience, and really make sure that's well defined, because that will help you in terms of what data you collect and how it's organized and who sees the data and how it gets reported. And, and I'll just never forget when we were going through a lot of this process, of course, there's a lot of data out there, and there were companies that would come and say, gosh, we can tell you, off of Facebook if your customers like Diet Coke. And, and it was like, well, that's great. What am I going to do with that, And that's it. Like, it's hard sometimes to just say, we really need to focus and, and only have and use that data that we think is going to make a difference in our business. And I think it just makes it an easier process and clearer, and I think it's something you can react to then. You don't get overwhelmed by all the data that's available.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we have a few more minutes, and I wanted to see if there were any questions in the audience. So we have time probably for one or two questions before we begin to wrap up. Does someone have a mic in the audience? Is there a way to get the audience questions here? Or maybe someone can just speak up a little bit. Anyone with a question? I can keep going. I have plenty of questions here. Yes, please.
How do you connect up your customer records with all of the activity of the customer, social media, et cetera, and know you got the right information?
So let me quickly repeat the question. The question was, how do you connect your customer activity with all the records?
And with their activity in social media, et cetera, to know you got the right person.
And with all the activity in social media so that you know you have the right person. Well, you want to take that?
I can take that, and I'll be honest, and we're a highly regulated business at Schwab, and we have not yet gone that extra mile to kind of take individual IDs on a social basis and connect it to our customers at this point in time. It's an area we're pursuing, but it's an area that we have some regulatory hurdles that we have to overcome. But the rest of the information, we're thinking about behavioral data, touch point data, the ability to connect that really comes down to getting identification information. When we get a prospect, information we have about a prospect is a cookie, right? So that's maybe all the information we have initially, and being able to kind of link those information and kind of, as that prospect comes back to our site, we can kind of view what that prospect, the pages that they visited. We're starting to build a profile. At some point in time, that prospect provides an email, or they provide a telephone number. Then we have the ability to kind of use that information to connect to a personal ID and kind of connect into other types of information using kind of a customer ID methodology. So it's kind of, it depends upon the customer and the prospect in terms of the information we collect, but it's that identification data that we need in order to kind of link the data together.
Thanks, Susan. Is there something that you're doing in terms of intersecting social data with sort of your customer profiles?
So it is a lot of similarities to what John was talking about. It really is, we're constantly looking at email, telephone number, our perfect fit number, and so we're tracking, that customer in terms of they open an email, they click through to our site, they, they sign on to our site or interact with Facebook, and they share a product. So it's certainly not clean, because customers don't always identify themselves up front, but it is something that allows, through watching that customer as they navigate through the web, we're able to pull that information together. And then, as I mentioned, within our stores, when they're checking out, they're giving us either their perfect fit number or their phone number, which allows us, again, to tie that all back into a single record.
Thank you. One other question from the audience? So if there's no question from the audience, I have a question for both of you as well. So what are some of the things that you'd like to do with the technology and with sort of in terms of, continuing to sort of advance your agenda that you're not able to do today? What are the one or two problems that folks who are starting companies today in this audience should come back to you next year with?
Gosh, that's a good question. There's a lot of different dimensions to this. When I think about the opportunities out there, I think about mobile, and I think about how we need to be able to kind of integrate data from mobile to PC to website. That's not an easy thing to do right now. I think of things like voice recognition, speech recognition, in terms of being able to kind of really understand. Not all customers fill out surveys to get information, and oftentimes, if you can kind of mine this unstructured data to kind of figure out kind of what's on an individual's mind. Are they happy? Are they sad? Or frustrated? What types of products and services? What type of questions they have? So I think that's definitely a fertile ground right now. So those are a couple ideas. Tons of ideas. There's tons of opportunities in this space for sure.
That's great, John. Susan, from a retail standpoint, which is a very different environment, and you have some, very strong sort of both offline presence and as well as sort of a growing online presence. Are there some unique technology challenges that you're trying to solve that there are folks in the audience that could be building products for you?
And I think particularly for us, because we weren't a cataloger, we hadn't done direct to consumer when I got to the company, and so data is, working with data in terms of, particularly as it relates to the customer, is not something that the company is really used to. And so what's been exciting is being able to really show that you can make a difference when you have the data and it's used properly. And I have to say, one of my next big initiatives would be around inventory for us. And you probably have heard, for a lot of us retailers, a big initiative is now for our online business to be able to ship from store. And Macy's and some of the larger folks are doing this today. We've been moving along in terms of getting to that point where we will be able to ship from store, but as we start to ask ourselves these questions about, well, when do we ship if, we're shipping across the country, or there's only one left on the shelf in that store, or the customer ordered 5 things from 5 different stores, and do I now have 5 different shipping charges? And how do I be proactive so that even before that customer places an order, I'm moving inventory or having it in the right locations close to that customer where the demand is? And obviously a lot of you probably heard about what Amazon, came out a couple of months ago saying they were, forecasting where the demand would be and moving that. And I think, so how do we do that so that we're more effective and we're not holding so much inventory? So for me, in terms of data, that's the big next opportunity for retail.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And John and Susan, thank you very much for your time. It's been great having you here today. Thank you to the audience for being such a great audience.